And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Copyright 2.0 show, episode number 357. As usual, I'm Jonathan Bailey from the site Plagiarism Today, which can be found at plagiarismtoday.com, and also a variety of Twitter handles, and now broadcasting from a new undisclosed location. The great attorney, Evan Sherez, who is going to have a quick word with you about this podcast and the nature thereof it.
Well, it's good to be here again from a new undisclosed location. You know, who knows where I could be. Maybe my new place 5 blocks down the road from the last one. You know, maybe not. But yeah, like you alluded to, again, I have to remind everyone that this is not legal advice, and that you shouldn't take anything I say as legal advice, and that this is just my general commentary on the week's stories. So now we could move on to what we're going to talk about today, John.
Yeah, we've got a lot of really interesting stuff today, and I'd like to make a note for anyone who is joining us live that we actually have enabled the Q&A feature for the first time. We're experimenting with it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and I apologize. We will tinker with it again. But if you are watching this on the link I tweeted out, if you just go up to the menu in the upper right-hand corner of your Google Plus viewing page and the Q&A feature, you will be able to ask, you should at least be able to ask us questions, and we will happily try to answer them to the best of our ability. I'm hoping it actually works. I'm kind of skeptical about it right now, maybe tinkering with this and getting this to work later on. But anyways, yeah, we've got a lot to go. We're actually a week behind. That's one. So 2 weeks worth of news. Anything going on you want to talk about before we jump in?
Well, not really. Like I said, I'll be joining Malfi Home Furniture soon, and the visa is in the middle of getting taken care of, so I'm excited about that. Should be done within a week or two. And not much else, John. How about you?
The only thing I've got on, I think Evan just dropped out. Yeah, I should warn everyone also, Evan's internet access, less than ideal at his new place right now.
John, you can't hear me?
You're back now.
Okay. Did I cut out? Yeah, like I said, I just moved in here, and we're in the middle of replacing our service, so if it does cut out, I do apologize about that. But it should be up and running.
Those things.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, hopefully we'll get internet that isn't potato before too much longer. So, but yeah, I understand. Believe me, my old apartment that was atrocious. And so I sympathize with you and hope that you're able to get it straightened out quickly for everyone's sake. For your sanity, if nothing else.
I want to say my streaming capability is extremely vital to my mental health. So,
yeah, how are you ever going to take advantage of what we'll be talking about later in this podcast?
Well, I think actually music is fine. I think I can stream music. It's just probably video, hockey games, and Netflix. That's what I can't do right now. It's really awful.
It is a So no Netflix. Well, then I'm dead. I have no entertainment now. I guess I'd have to go out in the world and meet people if I live there. You know.
That sounds horrendous.
It does. Oh God. Ooh, no. But yeah.
So
we do have
today. We will start with the Marvin Gaye battle and what's been going on in the last 2 weeks with that.
Surprisingly, still very, very hot in war, despite the verdict.
Mm-hmm. And then what's after that?
DVD Fab. This one's an interesting one. It deals with the DMCA and the anti-circumvention rules. So we'll be dealing with that.
Exciting stuff.
I know. And from there, it looks like we slide in some Beastie Boys again.
And then after that, we're on to the Universal Music. Who has countersued in a battle against InFlight, which is a service which brings music to, you can guess, airplanes while you're in flight.
And we don't leave Universal behind we don't leave them behind at all, because we come right back to them about a digital class action royalty dispute. They're actually the last major label to settle this, it turns out. So this ought to be interesting.
After that, I think we're talking about Ted, my favorite, talking teddy bear.
You have multiple talking teddy bears?
Well, I have my own, of course. But not as good of a guy as Ted.
Of course, that's fair.
I also wished upon a star in the middle of a storm, but don't sue me. And then we go on to MGM and their lawsuit over Raging Bull, which has been,
From
you know,
the wait, didn't the Supreme Court rule on this one, Files? And the answer is yes, but it's still not over
right. And
yet.
then on to the Soul Clash, apparent ripoff
Yeah.
of World of Warcraft, a game that took 2 years of my life away. So
Oh,
maybe we
we'll avoid that.
should.
We'll avoid too
uh,
much discussion in there, just in case they start getting the DTS or something. They start really, reaching for the gaming mouse.
yeah, yeah, that would be a problem.
And finally, wrapping it up with a trip to the ocean and Tidal, the music service that has the musicians all aflutter and the a little less so, it seems, from what I've read. So this ought to be
Yeah,
good.
there's a lot of press on this.
Oh. Well, that's what happens when you get, Jay-Z, Madonna, Daft Punk, Dead Mouse, they're involved, Beyonce, Nicki Minaj, all throwing their star power behind something. Press will happen.
Hmm.
Can't guarantee financial success, but I can guarantee you press. Well, okay, you want to jump on in on our first story about the latest in the Blurred Lines case?
Sure. So we last left it
Yeah.
with a decision that there was infringement. So we found that Pharrell and Robin Thicke were both found to be liable for copyright infringement by the jury. But
to the tune of $7.4 million.
right. But there's obviously more players than that. There's a record label. There was T.I. There's a number of record labels actually. Interscope Records, Universal Music, Star Trek Entertainment were not found to be liable. And so the Marvin Gaye family is looking to add to the potential list of pockets, and this brings in issues of secondary liability. So if Pharrell and Robin Thicke are the ones who are directly responsible, and you had other people involved in the manufacturing and distribution side of it, that's what the Marvin Gaye family is trying to argue, is that other people have distributed and taken a secondary role in the distribution of this copywriting of this infringing material. So we want money from them too.
And this is you mentioned the damages that can be earned from this. There's additional damages they can go after, but there's also the issue of possible injunction. It's going to be a lot easier to get an injunction if they're able to hold the record label and other parties at least partially liable.
Yes, that's right. In order to get an injunction, which I don't think they really want, I don't think they really want to stop this song from being heard across the country. It's a tool in order to bring these people to the table. Threatening to stop their ability to distribute the song is a massive threat, because do you know how many different licensing deals they have with tons of other organizations, and they'll have to take measures to basically stop this song from being played. It's just a massive undertaking that would probably cost them, a huge portion of what they may have to pay out in legal fees to just settle it. So an injunction is a huge
and it would not just be an injunction against the sale. It'd be an injunction against like streaming to bars. The YouTube videos would undoubtedly go down. So yeah, it would be a huge deal. It'd be a tremendous effort to stop the distribution, and it would also be a lot of money lost in the process.
Yeah, it's next to impossible to stop it, because you're gonna have like hard copies in I mean, I don't know if there are record stores anymore, but I don't know if there are many anyways, but there still are a few. They'll have to make sure that those copies are accounted for. It's a lot.
So,
yeah.
But this effort, basically, the logic is quite simple here. The jury did not find him liable, but the lawyers for the Gaye estate are coming back and saying, well, it pretty much flows logically. Williams and Thicke did infringe. Therefore, connect A, B, C, D. They had to as well. The jury was not correct in that finding.
Both sides are trying to use this tool. It's called a judgment as a matter of law, which pre-trial is called summary judgment, but it's also actually after. It's a measure that you can use after trial is done, and Pharrell's side is trying to seek both a new trial and a judgment as a matter of law that they were not infringing, but Marvin Gaye's side is trying to say that, hey, if the jury found that this song, was an infringing song on our composition, yet all these other parties are distributing it, which is one of the exclusive rights of copyright holder. So how is it possible that this is both a copyright violation, but B, not a copyright violation for the people who are distributing this song? So it didn't make sense for them. So they're trying to come back and say that even though the jury felt that these record labels were not liable, they should be.
And yeah, that's basically it. And so ruling on this is just simply what the gay estate is asking for. But as you pointed out, this really is a negotiation tactic at the end of the day. It's a means to force, you know, everyone involved, the labels, Pharrell Williams, Robin Thicke, to the negotiating table to actually, you know, prevent an appeal and prevent a long, drawn-out legal battle, which both sides have signaled they are digging in for. So,
right.
At the end of the day, the gay estate has no interest and gains no benefit from a protracted legal battle. Now that they've got their jury award, they want to, you know, wrap this up. And the Williamson thing.
They don't gain anything either from stopping the song from being played. That's not what they want. They just want these record labels at the table and with their pockets open. Now, the more interesting thing this week about this case, which is actually what I focused most of my attention on, was the op-ed about from the lawyers of the gay side. I don't know if you had the chance to read it, but it was called "How I Won."
Yeah, it was posted in the Hollywood Reporter. Yeah,
that's right. So I think there were a few points here which I'm just gonna claim victory on, because I think there were some of the things that I said over the past few podcasts about what this case is really about, and I think what this lawyer said really kind of backed me up on that. Before we start that, though, there's he starts the case by really like kind of putting everything into perspective for the reader on how this case became a case and not a transactional, hey, let's get a licensing deal worked out between the gay family's transactional lawyer and Pharrell and Thicke. So he reminds us that this was Thicke and Pharrell who launched the lawsuit using a tool called a declaratory relief suit, which is, you know, a preemptive strike in the legal context. You basically sue somebody else who you think may sue you and say, hey, court, let us know if we're infringing. So, you know, this tactic is often a way of getting people who may not be willing to really litigate, who don't have the money to litigate, you kind of getting them kind of between a rock and a hard place in the negotiating process. Yeah, so if we're going to sue you, it's like our guns are ready. You know, we're ready to go. So are you really ready to go? So he talks about that and then kind of uses that to frame them as the bad guys here. They're like, oh, well, really, there was this guy Levinson. He was the gays' transactional lawyer, and you know he reached out to discuss possible settlement or just possible royalties because the gay family felt that, you know, this was our song, and so he discusses, and the lawyer Richard Bush discusses how Levinson basically ended up reaching out to him and being like, hey, we're going to need you, and so this is how he ended up getting involved with the case. And so a few things he talks about is reiterating their stance that they felt handicapped by not being able to play the sound recording because they could only play, remember, those like MIDI versions of the actual composition. So they were definitely planning an appeal had they lost. But he moves on to say that the other side was wrong in their legal strategy by arguing that there's no real match, kind of note for note, which is what he says that the Pharrell side was, is that, you know, they kind of had their musicologist come on and be like, okay, listen to how these three notes sound together, and then these three notes, and then these three notes. And he felt that this was a bad strategy because the jury instructions ultimately ended up saying is that this doesn't have to be a perfect match. You know, it just has to be pretty close. And so he thought that their strategy and their musicologists were better, and that's why they won. They had two great musicologists who was able to explain that, you know, just because things sound the same in the same genre doesn't mean that they're not a copy of each other. Is that while lots of songs sound the same in the same genre, these two were like extremely similar, and their musicologists were able to hammer that point in. And obviously, that other point that we talked about is that Bush thought that Thicke and Farrell couldn't just keep their story straight.
Yeah.
Talked about being inspired and then not being inspired, and then there was the deposition, and then there was the Vicodin. So this was a case about good expert witnesses, and it was a case about bad defendants, or in this case, plaintiffs.
Yeah, technically plaintiffs, but spiritual defendants, if you will. If there is a such thing as a spiritual defendant, there should be. We should make that a thing. But yeah, and I agree with the lawyer. Basically, you can't keep contradicting yourself and expect the jury to believe you. That's not how life works.
Yeah, you ruin your credibility.
And credibility means a lot in these type of sort of ambiguous cases.
Yeah.
If the jury doesn't like you, they can find a way to punish you. It's pretty simple.
I mean, in such a tight case like this, likability and believability is so important. I mean, likability and believability on the stand is so important in any case. I mean, you look at criminal defense cases, civil litigation cases. It's there's a reason why trial lawyers are great trial lawyers, regardless of really what field they're trying. A lot of trial lawyers have a really broad spectrum of cases because, regardless of the material, they know how to make a witness look bad, and that's the skill.
It is a skill. It's a public speaking skill as much as anything, and a personal relations skill. And it's almost independent of the law period in many ways. You could probably take someone without much background in law and make them a decent, trial attorney easier than you could make them a non-trial attorney in a lot of ways.
Yep, and that's why everyone's wrong about this case being a landmark for copyright infringement cases, because you have a big-time celebrity, who knows what's going in with the minds of the jury. You could have somebody who doesn't like that his music video is full of naked women and could hold that against you. So, like, when you have such a high-profile defendant, or like a defendant is not the right term, of course, he's a plaintiff, but I feel like if I said plaintiff, most people who are listening won't really understand what I'm talking about. So I'll just use his name. We'll say when you've got a guy like Thicke, who claims to be on drugs at one point, and then claims to be inspired by Marvin Gaye in the media. You can't really put that past the jury as you can't really put that fact past it being influential on the jury.
And the other aspect of it is right now what we have is a district court award here from a jury. And yes, It's important. Yes, it's relevant. Yes, it could be precedent to other cases, but it's still not an appellate court or, God help us, a Supreme Court ruling, which really does have that influence on other cases. It has a lot more weight the higher up it goes.
Right, and it's not like a specific point of law was decided. It's not like the test for copyright infringement and substantial similarity has been changed.
I would be very surprised if we see this cited in a large number of cases moving forward. I'd be very surprised.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Because like I said, it's a jury determining a question of fact, and there aren't really very subtle issues of law having been decided. I want to leave this case on with one really awesome quote, and I think it was really an interesting way to humanize himself. Is that at the end of the article, he was saying how once the trial wrapped up, this was like, I mean, this could be complete bull trying to really take advantage of the moment, but he's like, this was the most important trial I've ever done, and after the trial was done, I couldn't stop thinking about anything else but the trial. He's like, I did everything to distract myself. I went to the movies. I walked on the beach. I did a Sons of Anarchy marathon on Netflix. And then Tuesday, it finally came. We didn't start the case, but we made sure to finish it.
And Billy Joel somewhere going, that's copyright infringement!
Yeah, it's yeah, it was anyways, it was an interesting article. And
it is an interesting article. And actually, the counsel for Thicke and Williams also wrote a counter op-ed piece that's also available.
Oh, really?
On the report. Yeah. About why they feel the ruling was wrong and how they feel they got there, basically. So, we're checking out. And that's kind of weird. To me, that's a bit like, like the end of like the Super Bowl, how they interview both coaches. Oh, Coach, what do you think went right today? Well, we scored more points than the other team, Jim. That's how we won.
Well, it reminds me of like after Judge Judy.
Oh God,
those fake cases. They interview the They interview the two parties.
Yeah. I've got to say, I've watched more than my share of TV court dramas, and I actually find them pretty interesting from a legal perspective a lot of times. The I think they're actually good for the public, strangely, because they do bring some basic concepts of law into the public hands that needs to be put out there.
Yeah, I mean,
The importance of written contracts being a
yeah,
recurring theme on these shows.
yeah. The importance of, okay, do you have any evidence?
Yes.
Your Honor, I swear.
Hmm.
Well, judgment to the other person.
Yeah, exactly. That happens so many times it isn't even funny.
So
Um,
yeah, John, you want to tell us about what happened with the beast with I'm sorry, with
DVD
DVD
fab.
Fab?
Yeah, this is a bizarre case. Now, in the United States, underneath the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, there is a set of rules. It's called the Anti-Circumvention Clause, which basically means if somebody protects a copyrighted work with DRM or digital rights management software, the breaking of that is illegal outside of some very narrow exemptions that are granted by the Copyright Office once every 3 years when they come down from their mountain with two stone tablets. I may be thinking of the wrong story. But the point remains, other than those exceptions, it is illegal to do it. Now, there is a company based in Hong Kong, I believe it is in China, called DVD Fab, and they make something that their product, DVD Fab, um, does exactly that. It breaks the encryption on DVDs so you can back it up and store it and whatever. And this encryption on DVDs, known as the AACS encryption, is hopelessly borked. It has been broken for probably longer than I've been running plagiarism today, and it's old news that it is so easy to break. However, the organization that still manages it, AACS-LA, acronym HELL is what we're entering here, because remember DVD is an acronym too, um, basically has sued DVD Fab, and they've already secured some injunctions against their sale and distribution in the United States, but now they've gone back and they've secured, and those injunctions, by the way, also cost them their social media accounts. They lost the ability to post to Facebook and Twitter and elsewhere. They
Right.
lost their website for a while, their U.S. payment processors. This company's been hit
Right.
pretty hard
Yeah.
already, but now AACSLA has gone to court and gotten additional injunctions. But at this point, all of AACS's activity exists pretty much within China, so it's kind of unclear how enforceable these injunctions are going to be.
Right. Like you said, John, you cannot traffic in software that lets you break
Yeah.
into other software. That's kind of the basics of it. If that other software has kind of some circumventions to prevent copying, etc. Um, like you said, this company has no remaining real assets, within the jurisdiction of U.S. courts.
Hmm.
So that kind of has been done, and so for some reason they've decided to go back to U.S. courts to try and stop this company from operating in mainland China. We're not talking Hong Kong. We're talking
Okay, so it actually is mainland China. Okay.
yeah. So these orders have been issued, ordering these Chinese companies that are working with DVD Fab to stop working with them, and ordering that these domain names, which are Chinese domain names, to shut down. But these are outside of the jurisdiction of U.S. court orders, and so it'll remain to be seen what exactly their tactic is here. There was one commentator one commentator said this. He's like, I don't really understand why they did this. It's like a judge ordering ISIS to stop killing people.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting way to put it.
And by the way, DVD Fab apparently also breaks the encryption on Blu-ray too. It's one of the reasons why it still remains relevant today.
Hmm.
But I mean, one of the things that was interesting was supposedly with DVD Fab, one of the things they had done was make it so that people like me in the United States could not access the software, use geo-blocking basically. I'm not running any VPNs or anything, and I was able just to tinker, and it was letting me download the main package right here, right now.
Hmm.
So obviously that isn't going on. It's accessible to U.S. Customers, but that doesn't mean they're going to have any luck enforcing these injunctions, given that in China this anti-circumvention clause doesn't exist.
Yeah, I I can't really speak to that, unfortunately. But maybe there's something in the works that we haven't
Maybe.
seen yet. I know we were talking about the U.S. Trade Commission and 3D printing, and they were seeking authorization for the to be able to shut down certain online access to copies of a violated patent. This was a few weeks ago. We were talking about this,
Yeah.
about how they went to the Trade Commission to try to see if there's online jurisdiction there. So maybe there's a place there somewhere if that whole line of reasoning ends up kind of holding with the Trade Commission.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. You want to shift gears and talk about some Beastie Boys?
Sure. Yeah. So I don't know if you have you heard of this band before, Paul Boutique? Or
No. I have no idea who they are.
yeah, I don't know who they are either. So the Beastie Boys are involved with a lawsuit over sampling that they've allegedly used. I don't think that's really at issue here. I think they have used bits and pieces of Paul Boutique's copyrighted material, I guess their songs, and the Beastie Boys have been sued over their use. But here's the thing: it's who's suing them. It's a company called Tough America, and Tough America has been ruled to not have standing. So even though there was no license here, there's no case because the right person has to sue. I can't go and sue somebody for using somebody else's copyrighted material. I have to actually have either an.
You can't just like jump in on the Marvin Gaye case, like, hi, I'm suing randomly.
Right. So who can sue? Someone who owns the copyright, a copyright co-owner, or an exclusive licensee. So those are your two, main options. So who is an exclusive licensee? Well, an exclusive licensee is, basically exactly what it sounds like. Someone who has the exclusive right, only they can do it, to the copyright of a given work. So I think we've discussed this in the past, is that in order to give an exclusive copyright license to somebody, all of the co-authors of a given piece need to sign on. Because let's say you and I are co-authors of something, and I'm talking to person C, and person C is like, hey, I love that song you and John wrote. Can you license it to me, but make an exclusive license? And I'm like, hey, sure, that sounds good to me. I've then stopped you as a copyright co-owner from licensing it to somebody else. So as one co-owner over another co-owner, I can't stop you from doing that. That's something we have to do together. And so that's what happened, is that the court ended up finding that only 2 of the 3 Paul Boutique authors had assigned copyright, or had assigned a license, or had given a license to the company. Yeah. And so even though it was described as an exclusive license, since only 2 of the 3 authors were the ones who were signatories, it didn't count. And so as a non-exclusive license, they had no standing.
And this is very bizarre because 2 of them signed in 1999. Going way back here. 2 of them signed in 1999, and apparently that deal was pretty straightforward. But then we fast forward to 2012, the 3rd guy comes on board and signs a quote-unquote right to sue, which doesn't actually exist as a right.
Yeah. He was trying to assign his right to sue to somebody else. Let's say that's kind of like, it's almost like John, you've got a gardening business, and you have done the gardening already, so that's done, and you owe me $100. So I'm like, hey, why don't you give me your right to collect like that gardening, accounts payable you've got? Yeah. So you sign that to me, and then I'm like, and if this person doesn't pay me, then I'm gonna sue them. But that's not even what happened here. It's not even the accounts payable here. Is that like, he's gone to be like, hey, I've got this right to sue. Who wants to buy it? And obviously, Tough America, who was 1/3 away from an exclusive license, went up to this person and like, okay, let's make a deal. But for some reason, they didn't just assign the 3rd part of the exclusive license.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Is a right to sue does not an exclusive license make.
Exactly. So they worded it strangely, and that stopped them from having standing in the case.
Now, here you want an interesting bit of trivia about the Beastie Boys. In the past, since 2012, they've completed the trifecta. They have won one case where they secured a favorable settlement. That was the Goldilocks case. They have won one case with a jury trial. That was the Monster Energy remix case thing going on there. And now they've won one case on a summary judgment. Trifecta.
Yeah, I don't know who their lawyers are, to be honest with you, but they're probably really good.
That's like a triple crown there or something of litigation right there. That's pretty impressive. So again, I think that's since 2012. So 3 years they have won 3 separate battles in 3 separate ways. It's just pretty impressive. Well, let's talk airplanes for a bit. This is a fascinating one. Universal Music is being countersued by by the company In-Flight, and its parent company Global Eagle. You gotta love these generic names for these companies. Hey, can we come up with a more generic name for our company that does stuff in flight? In flight, excellent, good work. Meeting adjourned. Go home, everyone. But yeah, this is bizarre because basically what it centers around is that In-Flight, as you might imagine, basically does the music service that you tune into whenever you are in flight. And yeah, there's the one with like 30 songs that never has a track you actually want to listen to, so you go back to watching movies. Those guys. Well,
Right. So apparently, these different record labels have been basically providing them with songs for a long time, kind of saying, "Hey, this is the newest thing. Can you put it in your in-flight service?" And it seems like they operated in a pretty laissez-faire way for a long time.
yeah.
And then in 2009, they contacted Universal. This is in-flight to fill gaps in its licensing coverage. So I guess they just really wanted to get their foundation, their legal foundations set in stone, which would be a highly intelligent thing to do if you're running a business that's based on intellectual property. And so the label agreed to a licensing fee and then promised to send In-Flight a licensing agreement, but never did. And so this laissez-faire arrangement kind of kept going, where songs would be sent their way and then they would be played on their flights.
Yeah, and one of the issues that's been kind of entertaining in watching this has been, where do you obtain the license from? Sounds like a simple question, but don't forget most licenses for music are distributed on a national level, country to country. And so that works great as long as you're doing domestic flights. But what happens when your flight goes from the United States to Ireland or to Germany? Suddenly you end up in international territory here, and that can become a very thorny issue for doing this kind of licensing. And so that's one of the reasons why this laissez-faire system sort of existed, was because there wasn't necessarily a streamlined, easy, single path for getting all the rights and clearances you needed. And that's also one of the reasons why we've got this lawsuit. Well,
so come November 2013, all of a sudden a cease and desist letter arrives at In-Flight, and we ended up in a lawsuit situation.
Yeah, and now In-Flight is sort of turning the tables and filing a countersuit saying, hey, wait a minute, we had this arrangement, if you will, for so long, and you're just pulling the rug out from under us with this.
Right.
You've tolerated it up until now. You've known about it up until now. This is basically unfair.
Right. So a number of the countersuit claims are misrepresentation and interference with contractual relations, because obviously In-Flight does a lot of business with the airlines themselves, and so if you're an airline and you see that there's a potential dispute between your music host and the music companies, you don't want to get involved with that. You don't want to let these people play music on your planes, and then you're all of a sudden liable as well because it's happening. You're involved also. They're your planes playing the music. You're reproducing and publicly performing these copyrighted material, and so one cause of action available to businesses is the interference with contractual relations. it differs from state to state, but the basic premise is that if there's an unlawful way of coming between two parties who kind of have a contract, then you can end up being liable for that.
Yeah.
The counterclaim also has or alleges affirmative defenses, which are the basic concept of, yes, we're doing it, but here's why it's legal. And those two claims are estoppel and laches. Estoppel is kind of an equity way of saying someone else should be stopped from suing me because their conduct makes them kind of ineligible to sue us. Something that they did stops them from stopping our alleged wrong. Yeah. And then latches is when you kind of sit on your rights for a long time. So
we've been talking a lot about latches and copyright lately because of the Raging Bull case, which we'll be coming to.
That's right. That was before the Supreme Court.
Sit tight. We're not going to abuse latches on this one. We will be returning to it quickly. Okay. But we don't leave Universal behind for long because here they are again seeking and finalizing a settlement, it seems. A pretty important one.
Yeah, this one goes all the way back to that M&M lawsuit a number of years ago, and I didn't actually know that this was still around. I figured this was all settled up, but once M&M was able to win that distinction between licensing and sales, everyone else jumped on board. And so the basic story here is that when the music revenue shifted from CD and hard copy sales to individual downloads, and I guess we're already past that stage, right? We're on to streaming now. But when the first shift happened, the record labels or whoever owned the company, owned the distribution system, like iTunes, would pay the artists their percentage of sales income rather than their percentage of licensing income. So during the we'll say like, hey, you're going to make 20% of whatever sales you make, and you're going to make 50% of whatever licensing deals we can do on your behalf, and you're going to make 70% of your live touring revenue. That's obviously spitballing numbers. They're probably all much smaller than that, but in this case, labels and iTunes were paying artists only something like 15%, which was the general number for when a song was sold, and that's for their digital sales. But M&M comes up and says, hey, you can't actually sell something online, right? You're reproducing a copy. The purchaser is reproducing a copy, and he needs a license for that copy. So it's really a license when you download a song off iTunes, which
if you read that iTunes terms of service, sure looks like a license to me.
Right, you're essentially not allowed to resell the songs that you've purchased because you actually have an exclusive license to that song and not a physical copy of it. You haven't actually purchased or owned something. You just have a license. And so M&M was like, hey, if it's a license, if you're telling all your customers it's a license, then why are you telling me I only make 15% when I'm supposed to make 50%? And so that went through the legal system, and once he won, everybody else who may have, a total of 20 sales banded together, and we had class action suits. And this is, I think, was the last one to be settled.
Yeah, and that's and basically Sony and Warner have already done their settlements. They seem to have gone through these motions already. And the basic MO seems to be, okay, we're not going to give you the 50-50 split that you would for a true licensing thing, but yeah, we'll knock you up a few percentage points, type thing.
Exactly.
That's what negotiation is. That's what litigation is. It's negotiation with a stick, basically. Yep. That's what it is. And so Universal kind of held out longer than everyone else, but now it appears that they are ramping up to their settlement, and that will completely put this issue to bed, because that also EMI, of course, was also involved. But it's very interesting to think about, because I realize a lot of these record contracts were written in like the 60s and 70s, when this idea of digital distribution was a pipe dream. and would not have been discussed explicitly. Now, you rest assured, every record label contract mentions digital distribution very explicitly and
Right.
has terms for it that are very, very clear. And probably now has streaming and everything else too. But yeah, 20, 30 years ago, no, they didn't. And that's what this is about, is applying that terminology to what's going on in 2015.
Yep. And on the topic of settlements and the real world of negotiations, this next one, or at least these stipulations, it reads like what would happen if litigation happened in kindergarten. Uh,
Yeah,
so the Ted lawsuit, that everybody's seen the movie, or at least I've seen the
heard
movie.
about it.
Everyone I know has seen the movie because it was hilarious, great film. Um, a second company, I actually don't have their name in front of me. If you have that, they ran their own foul-mouthed teddy bear series online. I'd never heard of them. Have you?
And Charlie the Abusive Teddy. It's weird. I had actually heard of a different foul-mouthed teddy bear online, but not this one. No, I'm not familiar with these guys.
Right. So these creators sued Seth MacFarlane. I guess if you have a foul-mouthed teddy bear and then you're looking at someone else making like 300 million over a foul-mouthed teddy bear, you're gonna explore your legal options. And they did that, and they sued, and they settled. And interestingly, the stipulations read like this, and this is why I said it sounded like what would happen if kindergarten was where you litigated, because they stipulated that hey, we filed this lawsuit. Then once we saw the evidence, we saw we were wrong. So I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
they were
shake
like,
hands.
yep, you Seth MacFarlane created this independently. So I think we're done here. And obviously maybe there was some money on the side, but I just thought the stipulations read kind of exactly what would happen if just like two really honest people sued, or one really honest person sued someone else. Like, you stole that from me. Oh, you didn't steal that from me. Well, sorry about that.
Yeah, okay, well, have a good day, good sir. I apologize. And that's basically
Yeah.
what happened, and they're dismissing their own lawsuit with prejudice, which means it can't be refiled, and basically saying our bad. I believe is
Yeah.
the legal term.
Who knows what could be here? I mean, going on behind the scenes, there could be maybe a third party with a greater case, and this is posturing on Fox or Seth MacFarlane's side, using this stipulations to maybe discourage a third party from suing, because you have this other or their plaintiffs in this case saying that, hey, we've seen the evidence of independent creation and we acknowledge it. So that's the only thing I thought of, is that if this is directed at somebody else to discourage them from filing, because obviously discovery is extremely expensive, and
Yeah.
I don't think MacFarlane's side would be happy to produce everything to an
And the
third
other
party.
interesting thing is, obviously, if you are the plaintiffs in this case, backing out early is a good idea if you think you might lose this case so badly that you could be hit with legal fees.
Yeah, both sides did agree to pay their own legal fees.
Yep, and
So,
just separate and go your own way. That's all they're doing. And given how much money it says here that the movie brought in $500 million worldwide, I'm reasonably sure Seth MacFarlane's not going to be crying over his legal fees in this too bad.
yeah, well, uh,
Legal fees always suck, no matter how wealthy you are and how successful you are. But yeah, it's worth it to dismiss the lawsuit. It's worth it to pay and just move on.
yeah, I'd be very shocked if Seth MacFarlane was paying for his own lawyers.
Yeah, that's true too.
In this case, anyways, it's the studios that have the most to lose. So,
Yeah.
and anyways, no sympathy for either one of them. The point remains.
Yeah. They realized they were wrong. They shook hands and have walked away. That simple.
Yeah, well, I don't think we can say that for sure, because there's no indication of what finances changed hands.
Yeah, it's true.
So, if I was a creator who felt like some very large corporation had stolen my work and we ended up in legal battles, or at least I had a client that way, I would highly encourage them to say something that the other side may want them to say, in exchange for getting a larger settlement. I mean, you won't. First of all, these are authors who may want to work with these people. This is probably the first time in their lives they get to sit down, at a table with some of the more powerful, producers. Who knows what happened over the course of the trial. And so being able to play nice can get you more money and maybe not blackball you for the rest of your career in your creative measures.
Yeah, and that's possible. It's very possible that was the reason behind the decision. But the
Yeah,
way it's written and the way it's worded, it makes it look like at least it was a handshake and a goodbye.
agreed.
Well, we promised we would get back to the Raging Bull case, and we have. And this is very interesting. Now, remember some time ago, the Supreme Court ruled on this case, but only ruled on a specific element of it. The issue at hand is that the plaintiff in this case, Paula Petrella, she is the daughter of one of the co-authors in this case of the book that would eventually become Raging Bull. Sat on the lawsuit for an extremely long time. You might note that Raging Bull is not a recent film. And sat on the allegations for quite some time. And the Supreme Court ruled that latches did not bar her from bringing the suit. She would only be eligible to get damages and so forth in the past 3 years. There is a statute of limitations on copyright infringement, but given that this film is continuously being marketed, exploited, sold, licensed, etc., 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 even with just 3 years, there's some pretty significant money at stake, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that ability to move forward with the case, now MGM and others on the defendant side are moving to end it a different and I guess you would say more direct way by actually attacking the copyright infringement claim itself. And they're just basically arguing that, hey, we got the license to use it. What are you talking about, you crazy, crazy person?
Yeah, this got into the details that I was previously unaware of, in that there was both a book and a screenplay, or was it a manuscript? No, I think there was both a screenplay and a book, and the argument is that which one is the original source material and which one is the derivative work of the other, because if you get a license to use, let's say, a derivative work and end up copying elements of the original material, you haven't quite covered your bases. So that's the argument here. And although the original author is on the record saying that the book is the original material, and and that the movie is clearly based on the book, obviously that is not in the best interest of the daughter to go along with, and so she is arguing otherwise.
Yeah. And it's going to be an uphill argument for exactly the reason you said. The original author, has said it's based upon the book. The screenplay was kind of just a side thing, didn't really go anywhere. But she's arguing the opposite, that yes, they licensed the book, but the movie's actually based upon the screenplay. So it's a bizarre situation, but yes, it could, if the court ends up siding with the daughter, it could be a very, very big deal for MGM, who, like I said, has been continuously exploiting and earning revenue from this film year after year after year. I mean, it's considered a milestone picture by many people.
Right, one of the best films of all time.
Yeah, so it's going to be a big deal one way or the other. But yes, they did decide the case, but the Supreme Court rather did decide the case, but only the element of latches. So that basically means, well, now we get to have a case. Is where we're at.
Right. That's what a lot of people don't know, is that cases that get before the Supreme Court often deal with like minute issues of law and not necessarily like a specific fact pattern that needs to be applied to a settled area of law. It's actually very rarely that. And so a lot of the times, even though the case has gone before the Supreme Court, it actually has just gotten started. And a number of cases take various trips because they deal with a few different areas of complex areas of law that impact the whole country. And that's why the Supreme Court takes a look at cases sometimes before they're really done.
Exactly. So now, basically now we get a trial. We get a case. We
Mhm.
get to actually discuss the copyright issues and not just the delay.
Right, and speaking of copyright issues,
Yeah.
Soul Clash. Have you had the chance to play it?
No, I have not, and it doesn't really look like my type of game anyway, but it is certainly interesting from this perspective.
Right. So, you know, what I find interesting is that um, elves, dwarves, and pandas. Uh, that doesn't seem to me like a very strong basis for a copyright claim. Obviously, I haven't had the chance to play the game, but one of the interesting aspects is that Blizzard does they do purple elves, right? And it's like, well, how far away from a stock character do you have to get before it's really yours? Can you put a unique color into a race of people that have been done in fantasy forever and then claim that that's yours?
And you know, Tolkien is going to sue a lot of people very quickly, depending on Tolkien estate. It's going to go crazy.
Well, I don't think
He didn't really have it either. I
they
know.
was ever. Well, no one owns elves. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
they're mythical creatures
they're
from way, 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 way back.
they're either what's known as Senafair, which is kind of like stock settings, or they can be or a stock character or a stock race. These are different concepts in copyright law, and no one owns the elf.
Yeah,
No one owns the dwarf.
that is not actually true. Santa Claus owns the elves, but that's a completely different issue.
Well, you know, I'm not okay with elf slavery,
No,
so
I'm
I
not either. But
can't agree with you on that one.
free the elves, free the elves.
So yeah, this was a case going on in Taiwanese courts, um, and I guess we'll see how it develops. I don't know much about the game. I don't know if you want to comment more about this case, but I don't think I
Yeah,
had too much.
it's
I want to find out too much.
and it's like you said, the aspects that center around first off are the characters themselves saying that basically it looks like a ripoff of not so much World of Warcraft, but that Hearthstone game. That the card game based upon World of Warcraft, it gets really confusing really fast. World of Hearthstone, I think it is. But the other interesting thing is that in Chinese, and I'm going to totally botch this, the product is called Deota Chuanki, I think so you say it, Chuanki. And the result of it is there is another game owned by Blizzard called Defense of the Agents, more commonly referred to as Dota. So they're also kind of the trademark angle there, saying that's a little too close to our Dota mark. Um, which that actually might actually have some, well, pardon the expression, given the nature of the game, some legs. Um, it's all about giant ancients walking. Or it's a very bizarre game. I've only seen footage of it, but yeah, I don't know if maybe since it's being filed in Taiwan, if maybe there's some difference between U.S. and Taiwanese or Chinese copyright law that makes this more likely. But it feels like a stretch, but then again, we're still really sort of, this is an area of copyright law that's just sort of starting to be explored. The idea of what is defensible in a video game, you know, we're
Yeah.
really just starting to get our feet wet with this. I mean, think of all like the Candy Crush knockoffs that you see.
Well, this comes to the issue of software copyright, and that becomes quite complicated because then you've got coding level, and then how it appears as well. Sometimes there's multiple levels in which a video game can be a copy, and this is an interesting blend between both video games and the issue of stock characters that I
Yeah.
discussed before.
So yeah.
So, just to remind everyone again, a stock character is kind of a particular, archetype that is used by everyone, like elves or dwarves. And my question is that if I create a world where, elves are purple and they're short, dwarves are red, they're tall and fat, and then humans are all
Blue, make us blue, make us blue.
blue. And so if you do all those things and make little variations, which maybe on their own will not be protectable, and so if someone else was using blue humans, you would be fine. But if you take 6 or 7 different stock, archetypes, make a little a modification, and then someone else takes all of those and copies them,
Yeah.
I think there could be an argument there in that.
And there actually has been cases where that's happened. And a good example of one actually involves Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein's monster, as you know, is not copyrighted in of itself. It's from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, public domain book, been around for a long time. But Universal, and I've actually got an article about it on Plagiarism Today, Universal has effectively copyrighted their version of it. And when trying to compare two versions of Frankenstein's monster, they look at various features like the flat top head, the scar, the bolts in the neck, the green skin, all of which is unique to Universal's version and not found in the actual original character. And they have a whole checklist where if you violate more than a couple of these, they will send you a cease and desist. They actually have a whole
Right.
process for it.
So there's a very specific way to get a copyright in essentially what is a derivative work. Even though if the original work is still is in a public domain, obviously anything that uses elements contained in that particular version of the story, can be used by anyone. In most cases, there could be trademark issues involved, etc. But from a copyright perspective, you're fine. But if you want to create your own kind of version of that, you kind of have to watch out to see if someone else has made their own version and then gotten a copyright on that. So if you make a film about Frankenstein, that's set in modern day Japan, where Frankenstein is instead of a monster, he's someone who works all the time, just something ridiculous that's just different. You can get a copyright in that, even though you're essentially borrowing a storyline or the general feeling of a storyline that anyone can do.
Yeah, and another good example is the Wizard of Oz and that whole mess. Most of us know Wizard of Oz as the movie, the original Judy Garland movie, 1939, but it was originally a series of books, and the books have been long since slid into the public domain. L. Frank Baum, the author of the books, they slid into the public domain, but there are elements from the Wizard of Oz movie which are unique. One of them being the ruby slippers.
I didn't know that.
The slippers in the original book were silver. And they actually made them ruby in the movie, and this is true because they wanted to show off the Technicolor process, and they figured the red slippers would show up really good against the yellow background, and they were right. It was not necessarily a bad change. And if you ever get a chance to read the original Wizard of Oz books, the Oz books, I encourage you. There are children's books. They're a brisk read, and it's really funny to go back and watch the movie afterward because in the movie there's like all this build-up to getting a whole black and white sequence of the movie is like one page of the children's book. It's like, farm girl, tornado, boom, in Oz. Okay, story begins. It's like over like that. So the entire black and white portion of the film could be considered copyrightable for the same reasons. That was a unique storytelling element they added. So you got to be mindful of that stuff. And when they did, and this is also true, Return to Oz, the sequel, is not related to the original movie at all. It did not have permission, so they had to be very careful in producing it, not to pull too excessively from the movie and make sure they stick as close to the books as they could.
Interesting. I mean, I think that just for complete argument's sake, if you added more than, I would say, 3 or 4 small additions to stock characters, and then someone else stole that exactly, I would argue that some courts might recognize the copyright, but specifically outline that it is an extremely thin copyright, and what that means is that someone has to copy what you've done literally and exactly in order for there to be infringement. So that's one way to kind of get around this issue of, like, we don't want to give people copyrights in very for very minute additions to public domain material, because then you're essentially
Recopywriting
stopping
public
other
domain works.
people. Well, you're not recopywriting
Right.
it because the original material won't and can still be used. But what you're doing is that you're kind of stifling creativity by letting someone get ownership of Red Frankenstein. Like, really, that's not enough, man. But if you have, a number of small changes, like in the case that we discussed, you have, blue humans, purple elves, red dwarves, and those things are all
Red
borrowed
Dwarf.
specifically.
Have you ever seen the show Red Dwarf? I'm sorry.
No, I haven't.
You can
Let me
check it
just
out. It's a
finish
great
this super
comedy. Sorry, I
quickly.
didn't interrupt. Red Dwarf is actually a TV show, and it's hilarious. It's from UK.
So yeah, if you can kind of balance the public interest in having copyright only granted for sufficiently creative derivative works with the desire to stop blatant copycats and blatant theft of ideas or the expression of ideas. And that way you kind of grant the copyright but say that it's extremely thin, and then that way you're kind of pleasing both sides of the argument. But Red Dwarf, the show, tell me about it.
It's a science fiction comedy. It's from it's from the UK. It's a British TV show. Basically, it's about the last human being in the universe. It's set 3 million years in the future, and it features his exploits with an android named Crichton, the ancestor of the cat he smuggled aboard the ship, and a hologram
Okay.
named Rimmer that is brought to life to keep him from going insane. It's basically those four guys trying to get back to Earth, and they're all basically idiots. And it's actually it's imagine like Star Trek, but everyone's a moron type thing.
What decade is this from?
It actually spans a lot of decades. It started in the 90s. They just did another series though a couple of years ago.
Where can I find it?
Actually, all episodes, last I checked, are on Netflix.
All right, I will check it out. That reminds me of that show I've been meaning to check out, like The Last Man on Earth.
Yeah, I know Crystal and Ellie here watch it and enjoy it. So I have not seen much of it, but it has been playing in the house.
Cool.
So apparently it's pretty good. It seems to be actually pretty enjoyable. Though I have to say I'm kind of disappointed. I caught a few minutes of it, and there were 4 human beings on Earth now, which seems to be decidedly more than the title promised.
Yeah, that made. But I did see that they do like flashbacks. So was it a flashback
I
scene?
don't honestly know, and that's why I can't give you a spoiler because I have no idea if it's a flashback or if it's actual currently what's going on. But it seems like there's a lot more people on Earth than you would think for a show called Last Man on Earth. But then again, the actual, like I Am Legend and The Last Man on Earth, those movies had more people. So, just
Right.
saying.
But they
And
didn't
besides,
have
it'd be kind
the
of
title
boring.
specifically advertising The Last Man on Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe there were women. Oh, that must have been it. There's their way to get around the
Yeah.
title. Um,
There you go.
so music stars go turquoise for the relaunch.
Real quick, I want to talk about this since it's been so much publicity about it. Jay-Z, I don't know if we talked about it here, but it was not that long ago. He spent $56 million buying a music streaming service called Tidal. It's Tadil, like the ocean Tidal. I know I say it like Tidal.
We talked about it last show.
I think we did, yeah. And he very, very quickly, apparently, has turned it around and relaunched it. And the basic idea behind Tidal is that it is a high-fidelity music streaming service. For $20 a month, which is double what you get for a paid account on Spotify, you get access to lossless audio that you can stream to any device that you may have. And the reason it's gotten so much publicity is like you hinted is that all of these musicians are on board with it and making a big deal about it. They are promoting it very actively, whether it's Madonna, Daft Punk, I think, was there. You have, Nicki Minaj, a whole bunch of musicians really throwing their weight behind it in a very strong way, all across wide variety of genres. And they're sort of pitching this as hey, this is the artist's vision of what a music streaming service should be like. It features high-quality audio, offers some music videos, so the music video library kind of is not the best, Yeah. And the result is they've really pitched this as the artist vision of what a music streaming service should be. I just don't know if it's the consumer vision of what a music streaming service.
That's an excellent point. I think I'm stuck on the same thing we talked about last time, which is that when I put my headphones in, and not even any particular set of headphones, because I'm not exactly a high-end headphone purchaser or user. When I
Yeah,
put
we're
my
both
headphones
sitting
in,
here with our iPhone headphones in.
yeah, if I'm walking down the street and I'm walking to work, or I'm walking in, so I put my Spotify on and I get that song that I like, I'm feeling pretty good, and I think the sound quality is pretty good, and maybe I'm not quite an audiophile, but I don't know. I don't know if there's a mass market that is so upset with their streaming quality that they're going to
Yeah.
pay double for a new service that has a few brighter faces on it. I'm not sold on that concept.
I'll tell you what we did. I actually signed up for the free trial title, and what I did is I got the iPhone out, and one of my favorite bands is Local H. So I took one of their modern songs where I knew there'd be a good lossless version, and I listened to the two versions back to back. And with Spotify's normal 96 kilobit per second stream, I could hear the difference, but if I had not been sitting there, eyes closed, really paying attention, and right back to back, I wouldn't have known. I just flat out would not have known. And so if I'm running and I've got those Bluetooth headphones on, that mediocre quality, I'm
Yep.
not going to be able to tell the difference at all.
Yeah.
And I also took it and I passed it around to other people in the house, and the result was, they could tell the difference at the lower quality, but once we bumped up, Spotify has the option to crank it up to 320 kilobit per second streaming for free if you have a pro account. It's no additional cost. And once we did that, no one could tell the difference between the two, between the lossless and 320 kilobit per second. It just is non-existent.
Well, this is obviously targeted at the market that already spends money on great headphones.
The Beats audio crowd and all that.
Well, most people tell me that Beats aren't even that good, although I really have no opinion on it because I don't own a pair, so I can't really speak to it. But anyone who's got the big headphones, usually I could be completely wrong here, but if you have something that's going to go around your whole year in 2015, it's because you're really concerned about sound quality.
Yeah, I'd agree.
If you're not using a bud, it's because you want to cut everything else out, which is, of course, a quality that's only found in great quality headphones, and you want your music to come in very well. So obviously, with the success of Beats and its rise to a multi-billion-dollar company, they obviously see there's a market for people who really care about the quality of their music. But one of the things I think they're not thinking about is that I think Beats, while was an audio concern, it was also a fashion concern.
Yeah, it's more of a fashion.
It was a fashion statement, wasn't it?
I should have said Bose or something like that when really harping on the audio quality.
Yeah, I mean Bose is obviously has the the brand recognition as fantastic audio quality, but I feel like people bought Beats because they were like, hey, I'm a big, first of all, I'm a big fan of Dr. Dre, and I'm gonna proudly wear his brand, and his his branding was sleek, that it was just well done, and so no one's gonna be able to wear on their shirt that they're listening to
Tidal.
Yeah. So that's I think a point that might doom, for lack of a better word, a luxury streaming service.
Yeah, I'm not. I will say this: Tidal is my second favorite music streaming service. I like it a lot better than what Sony had, and Rhapsody and others I've tried. It's got a pretty solid library. It's missing some names that I need, or I would really like to have at least. But overall, it is a good service. It's got a good UI. It's a good look. The sound, of course, is great, but I don't know if I can justify $20 a month versus $9 a month. It just, and especially in my house, because we have the family plan, we get 2 streams for $15. You can't even get the lower end tier of Tidal for that price for 2 streams. So, there's no winning here for me. But no, I mean, I wish them well. I hope they find what they're looking for, and I hope they find that niche of that elite high-end music streaming service. I think it's there. I just don't know if it's big enough to support this type of service.
I mean, obviously they have huge goals because as much as those artists are about the music, they're about the dollar, and
Oh yeah.
so to come together in support of this service, obviously, or in my opinion, was motivated by maybe equity stake or well, I mean, I don't know if it says which one of those artists have equity stake. I imagine they all do. But I think that's obviously the big goal of these artists is that they want their piece of the next beats. But our concerns have been laid out on the table about whether or not luxury music without the ability to really brand yourself as someone who's using a luxury item can survive.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's going to be an interesting test. Well, that's all I've got. You got any final thoughts? Anything else?
Not too much, John. Just that I'd like to say how happy I am that winter is over.
It's never over. You live in the north. It's never
No, I live in
over.
D.C. We had the Washington Post officially declare the end of winter and the end of cold weather on Sunday.
Oh well, there you go. I guess it's official. I can't argue with that.
It's official now.
Well, on that note, everyone, with that official proclamation out of the way, my name is Jonathan Bailey. I am from the site Plagiarism Today, which can be found at plagiarismtoday.com and also on Twitter, Facebook, elsewhere at Plagiarism Today.
And my name is Evan Sherris. Follow me on Twitter at Evan Sherris. I know that John will tell you in a second that he thinks I should have a website, but
Yes,
I don't. And I look forward to talking copyright again, hopefully next week on schedule. Yeah.
Sounds great, and hopefully we'll iron out these bugs in the Q&A and do a little better job promoing when we'll be on. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you guys next week.